My name is Joseph. I was born into a Jewish family that learned thrift the way other families learn lullabies. We were not tragic and we were not saints. We were ordinary people who could turn a last crust of bread into breakfast and a joke, and still make it out the door on time. If you have never counted coins by the light of the refrigerator, you might not understand the mathematics that raised me. But I can tell you this. Poverty is not only about empty pockets. It is a curriculum. It teaches you what lasts, what breaks, what matters, and what you can live without. We queued for many things, and not only for food. Some mornings my mother and I would go to the store not for groceries, but for whatever came in today. You learn to scan shelves like a small-town detective. What's new? What's rare? What's missing that won't be missing again for 6 months? Buying was less a choice than a season. You bought shoes not because the old ones had given up, but because the shipment had arrived, and your friend had already gotten a pair. You learned to say later to your wants, and now to opportunities, even if they did not fit perfectly. We'll make it work, my mother would say, and we usually did. Clothes had a second life before we ever put them on. The best brands traveled between cousins the way family stories do, softening at the seams, collecting a history of elbows and knees. When something ripped, we did not throw it out. We sent it to the hospital of the kitchen table, where a needle, some thread, and my grandmother's stubbornness returned it to service. There was dignity in repair, a quiet defiance. This is good enough, and so are we. On the street we learned the other curriculum, the one adults pretend doesn't exist. There are neighborhoods where the elevator teaches you manners faster than school does, and ours was one of them. You say hello to everyone, even the men who never make eye contact. You hold the door. You learn to read voices the way musicians read notes, not only what people say, but how and what they are trying to hide. Humor became our private currency. A good joke could smooth a bad day, and a great one could make you forget you were carrying home a bag of potatoes and not much else. Religion in our house was less about rules than about rhythm. We were not observant in a way that would satisfy a rabbi, but we were faithful in a way that would satisfy a grandmother. Friday evenings meant a clean tablecloth and the smell of something patient in the oven. Blessings were short, gratitude was long. If there was money, there was meat. If there wasn't, there was soup. And either way, there was singing. Our rituals were small and sometimes improvised, but they stitched our days together as firmly as the thread in our sleeves. School promised a map out, and I believed it. Not because I worshipped grades, but because I had seen what happened without them. The smartest people I knew were not always the most educated. Some were artists in scarcity, magicians of the 3-ingredient dinner, diplomats who could stop a fight with a sentence. But even they would nod toward the door called education and say, "Go on, try it. Maybe it opens for you." So I studied. I learned to write my way through bureaucracy and count my way through bills. I learned history from books and history from kitchen gossip, and both were true in their own way. If you grow up poor, a windfall can be dangerous. It looks like freedom and behaves like a test. The first time I had real money in my pocket, I wanted to buy every later I had ever postponed. It takes discipline to understand that the first purchases you make are not things but habits. We like to believe that circumstances change us. The harder truth is that we carry ourselves into every new room. If you do not build different habits, new luck will simply fund the old ones. I learned that slowly, the way most lessons arrive. Too late to save you from the first mistake, just in time to keep you from the second. There were role models around us, though we did not call them that. There was the neighbor who could fix a washing machine with a butter knife, the math teacher who stayed after class for the one boy who pretended not to care, the aunt who kept a private fund for other people's emergencies. They were not famous. They were reliable. When I think about community, I think of them. People who showed up with the tool they had and did what they could, not because it would be written about, but because that is what you do. We left that neighborhood eventually, though in some ways it never left us. Scarcity trains your eyes. Even when the fridge is full, you can still feel the echo of counting. But the echo is not fear anymore. It is attention. I still mend things. I still read prices the way other people read weather. And I still believe in the dignity of good enough, which is not a compromise, but a compass. Perfection is a luxury that often breaks at the first impact with reality. Good enough is how bridges are built and families get through bad seasons. If you want a theory of change, here is mine. Change does not begin with circumstances, though they matter. It begins with the story you tell yourself about who you are in the worst week of your year. If you see a victim, you will wait for rescue. If you see a student, you will take notes. If you see a builder, you will reach for tools. The tools can be small: a notebook, a budget, a morning walk, a promise to call your mother. But small tools used daily make strong furniture. In our house, we did not talk about mindset. We boiled potatoes. We paid in cash and in patience. We said thank you before we had much to be thankful for. And slowly, stubbornly, the future got closer. I do not romanticize poverty. It is not a teacher I would assign to anyone. It is loud and humiliating and boring all at once. But I do honor the people who move through it with their humor intact, who refuse to become cruel just because life is. I honor the mothers who count and recount, the fathers who fix and refix, the children who learn to share a single chocolate bar without a war. There is a heroism in that, quiet and unpopular, the kind that never trends. Sometimes friends ask me, what was the first real luxury you allowed yourself? They expect a brand name. I say, free time. Time to read something that wasn't a manual. Time to cook slowly. Time to listen to a whole album with the lights off. After you have lived by the stopwatch of scarcity, freedom sounds like a long song. And when I had a little more, I bought the same thing for my parents. An afternoon off, a weekend where no one had to make do or make calls. If you grew up like I did, perhaps you know the trick of looking at a problem and asking, what will still be true when the sale ends? Hype fades, trends stutter, quality stays. It turns out this applies to people too. Find the ones who are solid when there is nothing to gain, and hold on. The rest is weather. I've told you about the cues, the hand-me-downs, the soup, the jokes. You could call it a story of scarcity, but that would miss the larger point. The larger point is habit. The larger point is that a life is made of patterns we repeat until they shape us back. If you change the pattern, even a little, the shape changes too. That is not a miracle. That is carpentry. And in a house where everything was used twice, that feels like an honest kind of hope. So here is my last lesson. Learn the slow way and paid for in small coins. Change does not begin with what happens to you. It begins with what you do next. The rest, luck, policy, a good winter coat, helps. But the hinge is you. Open that door, even a crack, and the future